Sitting in front of me is our next guest, who's not only a friend of the show, I think it's fair to say at this stage, but she's also the internet's favourite historian. She's here to talk about her latest book, as per promise she made some months ago. It's called 18, A History of Britain in 18 Young Lives. Welcome, History Alice Loxton. Good to see you again, Alice.
Oh, it's wonderful to be back.
Oh, welcome back to the top of the tower. You love tops of towers and stories related to them, don't you?
Yeah, I do, of course.
So you're very much at home here. When we were last talking, you were saying, okay, I'm going to write this book. I think you'll like it. And it's about... And I just love the idea. 18 chapters. It's GCSE day today here. It's Leaving Cert Day in Ireland. A lot of exams, a lot of people 17, 16, 17, 18, all around that age group. So you're bang on the money in that respect. Give us the elevator pitch for the book.
Yeah, so it's all about 18 different figures in British history and what they were doing at the age of 18 years old.
Yeah.
And so it's a real range of all kinds of different people. Some people who have spent their whole life in the same place. Some people have come from all different parts of the world. Some people were incredibly successful at 18. Some people had no idea of the challenges or the thrills ahead.
Yeah.
So I hope it's a real range of all kinds of different people, really.
Did you find that, despite the passage of time in history and, say, society, that regardless of where you are in the world and time in the great scheme of things, that once you're 18, you're 18? You know, is there a universality, a similarity in the experience for people?
Yeah, I mean, the reason I chose 18 was because it's this modern concept that today we see as this like moment of adulthood, but actually in history, the moments of, or the markings of adulthood, say getting married or having children, or, you know, all the normal stuff like leading troops to war on a horse, like all that kind of stuff you do normally. Lots of that happens much younger. So people had huge amounts of responsibility at a much earlier age. So it's kind of taking this modern concept of 18 and this moment of adulthood and putting it on the past, which brings up all sorts of interesting things. And I think basically people are at this moment where they're I suppose, like, you know, they're still kind of optimistic and full of hope, and you know, you haven't established yourself, and most people haven't established their careers or anything, so it's kind of the grittier earlier moments of people's lives.
Yeah, cynicism hasn't kicked in yet,
necessarily.
Exactly. No mortgages just yet, I'd hope. But your grandparents and my parents' generations would have been talking about getting married at 18, having kids at 19, 20. I mean, that's by and large gone out the door, isn't it?
And some scientists today will say that your brain doesn't even fully form until your 30s, which, you know, so I'm still waiting for that to happen.
Someday you will have a big brain, Alice, but until then you're just going to work with what you've got.
Yeah.
I noticed because your Instagram is brilliant. It's really good.
Thank you.
It strikes me as somebody who doesn't sleep, but because you're constantly on the go. But I noticed last week, because you've been at the printing presses, you've been, you know, getting the book ready. It's a beautiful book, beautiful presentation. Congratulations. We'll talk more about it in a moment. But when I saw you bringing on a horse, I thought, oh God, this is great. She's dragging a horse into proceedings. Tell me about the horse. And how did it go down?
Yeah, so I don't actually ever really work with any other historians, or I don't really like collab with any influencers or anything, but the only person I have worked with, the only other figure on my channel is Pumpkin, who is this tiny little pony, and I sort of just brought Pumpkin on to kind of tell people about the book, and people loved it. You know, people love an animal, they love dogs, they love horses. So yeah, if you ever, Pumpkin's a storm.
Yeah, on your Instagram, you talk about so many important buildings and places and churches and libraries, and here we are talking about Pumpkin the pony.
Pumpkin.
But obviously got a huge reaction.
Yeah, everyone was loving Pumpkin. They were like, bring Pumpkin on again. I was like, hang on, actually, everyone, like, Pumpkin's just a side note. Like, let's not get out of hand here.
Did you feel that Pumpkin was stealing some of your limelight, Alice? You seem angry about Pumpkin.
Slightly. You know, I'm just going to be careful with that sort of thing in the future.
Pumpkin going, I want double billing next time.
Yeah.
But you address Pumpkin in the clips. It's quite funny. You're like a kids presenter talking to Pumpkin.
Yeah.
Are you ready for a story, Pumpkin?
I don't know. Well, how should you talk to a pony? How would you do it?
I'd say, you hungry? I've got some carrots. Are you ready to go? Now,
he did buy the book. Actually, I've got the book here.
The chomped book.
Look, I can show you the page.
What page?
Where he
well, I think it's not just the page. I want to know which character, which of the...
It was Bede.
Bede.
Oh no, yeah. Look, there we go. There's the rip in the book.
Pumpkin.
And that's the evidence of pumpkins.
That's great. The actual pumpkin-bitten book is there.
Oh no, it was the introduction. It was the introduction.
Do you know what happened?
Desperate to get his teeth into.
But Hey! Pumpkin was trying to figure out, where am I in this?
Yeah.
I better be in the intro.
Maybe in the paperback I can give him a mention.
I'm
a note of thanks.
For next time. Loxton live in studio today. We're just talking about style and lack of. Mine, that is. Yours is always fine. But we were talking about Vespas then at the last thing. You don't own one.
I don't own a Vespa, but I am tempted
you
being
should.
in London. Yeah.
You do not need a car in London.
No.
You know, the transport's brilliant, but a Vespa, it would suit you, actually.
It'd be cool.
You should consider. I have one, but it's in Dublin. I might get it over.
Yeah, bring it over. Look, we could have Vespas together.
Have a spin.
That'd be fun.
Mine's electric, so you can, like, it's proper plug-in, so you can look it up later on. Get one. History Vespa weekends.
Yeah.
This is great. A whole new festival.
Yeah, not Pumpkin. Yeah, not Pumpkin anymore. It'd be the Vespa that's on the show.
Pumpkin's had his or her.
It's a him.
Pumpkin's had his day.
Yeah.
He's so yesterday. Back to your book, 18, A History of Britain in 18 Young Lives. Let's talk about someone like Vivian Westwood, for example.
Yes.
So interesting, so funky and kind of punky, and she died not too long ago.
Yeah.
Why did you pick her, and what was the knockout bit of her life that you wanted to talk about?
Well, Vivian Westwood, I really wanted to include because she seems like a modern figure to me.
Yeah,
like,
very.
She only has just recently died. And the first person in the book is Bede, who's this like Anglo-Saxon monk, and I just quite like the idea. It's quite fun saying to people, I've written about everyone from Bede to Vivian Westwood. Yeah. So it's quite a funny kind of span of history, and she's the kind of end marker. But she's cool because I always think of her as this very modern and trendy and sexy figure, the godmother of punk and all these things. But she was born during the Second World War, 1941, and so much of her later life and all the coolness is a product of her early years and this amazing history. So, you know, the make, do and mend mindset of rationing, you know, the focus on, she would have watched the coronation of Elizabeth II, and that kind of image of Britain is such a huge thing in her later life. So, and also you never really think, like her childhood was basically like a really idyllic countryside, Enid Blyton upbringing. And then, you know, someone like that becomes this like really rebellious figure.
You would think she was brought up in a different environment that involved anarchy. You
know?
But it's nothing. Isn't it funny?
No.
But you talk about the make and do and the reparations, all these kind of things. Kind of ahead of her time. I mean, that era, that generation again. Mm-hmm. That's kind of back in now. When you think of fast fashion is kind of ugly now, and people want vintage clothes.
Definitely.
And so on.
And she was writing. She was speaking at London Fashion Week not that long ago and saying that, and basically saying this like make, do, and mend mindset is really important, and you know, you reusing all your clothes. And actually, like if you look at Vivian Westwood clothes, you know the way they look like they're pieced together.
Yeah,
almost,
bits of kilt.
Like random kind of bits of cutting from the floor.
Yes.
And you could imagine that people might have done that in the Second World War. So I think it all stems from there. Really.
It does, and you know, one of the other great things about reading about 18-year-olds in history that or when they were 18 at that time, you take Richard Burton in Wales, for example, and you look at somebody and think, God, will they come to anything? You know, when you're 18 or 25 or whatever, you might think, God, where am I going to end up?
Yeah. And
you go to 18-year-old Richard Burton, who became one of the greatest actors of all time. Let's face it, it's certainly the last century. Tell me a little bit about 18-year-old Richard Burton.
Yeah, I mean, I find his story so amazing because, like, when you read about his life and how much money he would spend on things and the wealth that he had, like spending $1 million on a diamond, like it's
for
insane.
Elizabeth Taylor.
Right,
I mean, he infamously, this relationship was bonkers.
Yeah, and then you read about his upbringing, and it's like, I mean, obviously everyone has to come from somewhere, but it's this kind of, it's this like tiny little village called Pontrhydyfen, just outside Port Talbot in South Wales. He came from a mining family, he had loads and loads of siblings. This tiny little kind of end of terrace house where there was so many of his siblings. And it's just totally against the odds that he would go on to become one of the wealthiest men in the world. And I guess that's what I'm trying to do with the book is match up sometimes these really famous figures and match up that they, you know, in their childhood had no idea that they were going to end up there, obviously. But, you know, like Richard Burton's life is crazy because by the time... Basically, he put himself... So his mother dies when he's really young.
Yes.
Then he grows up with his sister. And then
his teacher.
And then his teacher... Yeah, he's born Richard Jenkins. And then he puts himself up for adoption, basically. And he is essentially adopted by his teacher, this guy who kind of helped him get into the acting world. And he was called Philip Burton. And so that's why Richard Burton was Richard Burton. But how incredible to... like, what a statement to do that when you're in your teens.
Yeah.
Like, it's quite a strange thing to do. So I was very interested in his life.
Hard-headed guy, and of course he went on. He was very, very messy private life as well as, but extraordinary.
But all through his life, he always said that his heart was in Pontrhydyfen, which is this tiny, tiny village in this Welsh valley, and so that stays with him for life.
But you find that I find that down in the last couple of decades interviewing very famous and well-known people, is that they often talk about their happiest times was when they were 18 and younger. That actually it was a bitter pill, so to speak. It's like Rosebud in Citizen Kane. It's that sense of childhood was the best.
Well, I suppose it's kind of nostalgia, perhaps.
Yeah, may or may not be real. I think that your book, Alice, is one that if somebody has just finished their exams, like the GCSE or the Leaving, would be a lovely gift to say, well done. No, I really mean that. I'm not being cynical, or I'm not trying to flog. I just think it'd be such a nice gift rather than giving them a voucher for something. This is a great book, Alice Loxton's book. It's called 18, A History of Britain in 18 Young Lives. It's hardback. It's a beautiful presentation. It'd be a lovely gift. Try and get a copy of it that hasn't been eaten by a horse, and then you were in business. Alice, great to see you.
Thank you so much.
Let's do it again in a few months' time.
Please,
all right. History Alice on Instagram, one of our favourites. Thanks for coming.
Virgin Radio.